I'm Luke Miller. Welcome to Tea Time in Olympia. Today's show will focus on the needs and rights of transgender youth. We'll be talking with Courtney Schrieve from the North Thurston School District. Also joining us will be Juliette Knight, co-facilitator of a support group for parents of transgender and gender nonconforming people. So let's get started. Hi, I'm Lucas Miller with Tea Time in Olympia, and today I'm here with Courtney Schrieve, who is the Executive Director for Public Relations for North Thurston Schools. Courtney, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us today.
Nice to be here, Luke.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, what you do for the North Thurston School District.
Sure. I have been, my background is in journalism, and I was a journalism major, high school newspaper person, and got into public relations, moved to Olympia almost 24 years ago, and worked at the state senate, so I got some background in legal issues and laws and politics and things like that. And then I ended up working at a reading foundation, and from there I went into education. So I'm not an educator, but I've worked in education for over 10 years, and I do community relations and communications for the school district, and then I also stay abreast of what's going on at the state level in education.
Okay. And what's your connection to the transgender community here in Olympia? I
think just I have always been an advocate for the LGBTQ community, and I've worked some with PFLAG. I have family and friends who are LGBTQ, and I just think that the world needs more allies, and the way you become that is to educate yourself about those issues. And it wasn't until I knew somebody who was transgender myself that I became more aware, and that's usually what happens is you meet someone or know somebody who knows somebody, but now it's a wonderful organization, and we have a lot of support in this community for that.
Okay, so what resources are available for parents who want to advocate for their trans or gender nonconforming youth in our school systems, and what laws or policies are in place to protect the rights and needs
Sure.
of trans and gender nonconforming youth?
Well, I think because of the media lately and initiatives and things that are going on, people think it's a new issue. But in actuality, as you know, anti-discrimination law, including gender identity, was passed 10 years ago. So I think that's one thing for people to understand is this isn't a new issue. What is new is now, because of the law and rules set out by OSPI and guidelines, now more school districts are realizing we know what we're supposed to do, which is to not discriminate against transgender youth, but how do we do that? And so many districts around the state are adopting policies that spell out those protections, not just for transgender students, but for all students, because the goal of public school systems is to provide a safe and free of discrimination environment for all our kids. So depending what district you're on, you could be in a district that's already passed these policies and things are very spelled out. You can also talk to OSPI, which is the state education organization, and they have lots of guidelines of what your rights are. The Human Rights Commission is another one. But my best advice is to go talk to your child's principal if you have concerns or you want to talk to them about my child is entering school, they identify as trans, or they've recently come out as trans, or they're transitioning. I need you to help me come up with a plan to keep him or her or they safe. And that may take some education. You may find a principal who knows their stuff and they're very well versed in these issues and policies, or you may find yourself helping develop a plan as you go. But PFLAG is a great resource for parents, as well as Gender Odyssey is a group up in Seattle that I think you're familiar with. Great organization. I mean, we're lucky in Washington State. There are a lot of great resources, not just for parents of transgender people, but everybody that wants to learn more about what is transgender. I think the biggest misconception out there, especially for parents of young children, is that it's a sexuality issue. And it's not. And so really just the basic education of what is transgender, what is homosexuality, what is sexuality, what is gender expression, just continuing to talk about those issues and what they are so that people understand and go, oh, that's not what I thought it was. Okay. So I think so. Those are some of the things: is familiarize yourself with the laws,
Right.
with the guidelines. Talk to advocacy groups in Seattle and Olympia, and definitely talk to your school's principal as a starting place.
Mm-hmm. And so what would you, what are good strategies for the youth to adopt if they're struggling with these issues in their schools? What are good ways for them to educate their teachers, their peers? You know, what resources specifically are available to our young people who want to empower
Sure.
themselves?
I think first and foremost, and if I don't answer this exactly what you're looking for, I think finding for yourself an advocate in your school.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's the principal, maybe it's the vice principal, maybe it's a counselor or a school nurse. A lot of times school nurses are overlooked as some of the best resources because they have been trained in all of these issues: HIV, sexual education. So just going in and saying, hey, could I talk to you about something? And teachers, everyone in education has a confidentiality as long as it's not mandatory reporting that someone's being abused or something like that. But under these guidelines, I mean, they have to keep, if a student comes and wants to share that I'm transgender, but I don't want anyone to know about it, that person should be able to help you based on policies and guidelines to help you navigate that map. If a student is more out and active, there's often groups at the schools like Gay Straight Alliance, which is an actual school club, or Pizza Clutch, which is a wonderful local organization, which is held at the high schools, and for kids just to be themselves and to come out and talk about who they are and what they're dealing with. You know, one of the issues we hear a lot about is bullying, and schools can say, well, bullying is not tolerated at our school. But if they don't know the bullying is going on, and you know, from when you and I were younger, no one wants to narc. You don't want to tell on someone, but it can get so bad that it can lead to mental and emotional distress if someone doesn't tell somebody what's going on. And so I think just encouraging our youth to speak out if you're comfortable. One of the best panels I've seen is to a group of our school counselors and nurses in my district last year, and it was a group of youth, and hearing from the youth is who am I and what does this mean, and when you mess up my pronouns, this is how it makes me feel, and those kind of things. So,
are there websites, does OSPI or the Human Rights Commission maybe have information available that is accessible to young people who want to know their rights?
That's a good question. I think, you know, young people are so tech savvy, but a lot of times state agencies and such don't design their websites for youth. So finding stuff on the web of like, so sometimes a phone call's the best thing, and just the Office of Civil Rights, I think it is, or Civil and Equity Rights, it's through OSPI. They are the ones that could guide somebody on where it is on the website if they couldn't find it. I found it in a couple clicks. So I think if you go to OSPI, our school district has a section on our website for all the resources for LGBTQ youth. It's usually at the high school level. But what we're finding is there's a lot of middle school kids now who are more comfortable coming out, and so they need those resources too. So just asking around the school, or again, if you're still not comfortable coming out to someone, making a call to a state agency or the Human Rights Commission. They deal with these issues all the time, and that's what they're there for, is to help people make sure that their rights are not being violated.
Okay. What else would you like to say to trans and gender nonconforming youth who may be struggling? What message would you like to send? I
think just, you know, we as adults and educators want school to be the safest place it can be. And a lot of times, you know, when you survey people, it's like, I do, despite all the things in the news and school shootings and everything, I do feel safe at school for the most part. But there are those kids that do not feel safe, and we may not know they feel safe. So trying to find that trusted person, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a neighbor, maybe it's your school nurse. Find somebody, or in the case where you just don't feel like you have anyone and you're feeling desperate, call the crisis clinic And I don't have that number memorized, but I
Right.
know you all can provide that. And it's usually on most school websites as well.
The Trevor Hotline is also another.
The Trevor
good,
Hotline is very good.
Good resource.
Because as we know, the risk and the rates of suicide and homelessness and attendance is much significantly higher among transgender youth a lot of times because they feel
Yeah.
not understood, alienated. Many of them end up kicked out of their homes because they're not accepted by their families,
Yeah, yeah.
and they're couch surfing. So in addition to not being accepted, there's homelessness, there's hunger, there's all these issues, delinquency that they might be dealing with.
Yeah,
Now, I don't mean that's happening to all transgender youth, but the risk is higher because of the situation that they might be in at home.
I believe the statistic I've read is that something like 26% of GLBTQ youth say that their biggest worry in school is harassment, bullying,
Right.
anti-gay slurs, things like that.
Right.
Whereas their, non-LGBTQ peers, are worried about their grades or,
Right.
sports or,
Right.
you know,
And
so,
I think
yeah.
the media is trying to present more LGBTQ characters in a positive light, and
Yeah.
there's so many resources on social media. I think that's where a lot of the youth go to Tumblr and places where they
Yeah.
can find kids like them that they can relate to. There's a lot of powerful voices out there of young people who are not afraid to say what they think, and sometimes that's a good place to go. But finding that adult mentor, somebody at your place that you can trust, and there is somebody there. I know a lot of kids feel like school is not their friend, but there is somebody there, and I hope everybody can find somebody like that.
Yeah. And what message would you like to send to parents of trans and gender nonconforming youth, either those who are struggling with their child's, coming out or identity, or those who are on board and want to help advocate?
I think the message that I've heard from other parents and talking to teachers for the same reason is it's okay to be mystified. It's okay to be confused. Young people who have had the courage to come out and be who they want to be are not going to be very patient with adults who mess up the names or the pronouns or don't understand. But be patient with yourself, because it does take time for someone that may have known somebody as one gender their whole life, and now they're making the switch in their mind, whereas for that person, they've been that gender their whole life, or from a very young age they knew that this was it's not who I am. So I think be patient, but then take steps to educate yourself. Don't act like it's a phase, that it's just going to go away. Don't let your child perhaps see your tears and your fear and your anger, because what they need the most, any child needs the love of and support of their parents. And going and talking to other parents at an organization like PFLAG, which is a support group for friends and allies and LGBTQ folks. But it's a great place to know that you're not alone, that you can talk to other people about what you're feeling, and finding resources that explain, what is this I don't understand? I think one of the areas that school districts could do better we were talking about this earlier, is in the area of training. So we have these laws, we have these policies. We need to train our staff and explain to them the bathroom issue. I mean, the bathroom issue to me is just in the weeds. It's really, once you explain it to people about, it's just where kids go to pee, or it's where they go to change, and no kid really wants to be naked in the locker room. Everybody wants their privacy. I think once people can get their heads around that, and it's really more of an adult issue than a kid issue, I think we'll see some acceptance around that issue. But for now, it's still new, and we need to take steps to train our staff into what do we do with the pronoun issue? Can we put their name on their records? Can we not? What do I call them in class? What do I call this kid? One day they are saying they're Jim, and the next day they're Jill. Well, that's a gender fluid kid. Perhaps I'm simplifying it, but there's a lot to take in. And so I think school districts and the state could do a better job at developing some curriculum for staff and human resources and training, and at the same time providing more forums, working with community members and groups like PFLAG, Pizza Clutch, to educate parents. because maybe you are never going to have a transgender child, but your child's best friend may be transgender.
Right.
So I think we all owe it as a society, based on civil rights, to educate ourselves about what it means and how we can support these kids, because they're very vulnerable and they need our support.
All right. Courtney Schrieve, thank you very much for talking with us today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yep.
It's a wonderful show. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
Hi. Today I have Juliette Knight, co-facilitator of support group for parents of trans and gender nonconforming children. Hello, Juliette. Thank you for joining us.
Hi.
Can you tell us a little bit about the group you run and what you do?
Yeah, so, well, I guess, originally I am from New Zealand, and, I have been here in the US for about 22 years. And my family background, I lost an uncle to suicide, and that combined with the work that I initially did when I came to the US, which included working for a same-sex couple, looking after their child. And then also my first husband's sister is a quadriplegic, and she's gay. So that, along with my son, who is identifies on the non-binary spectrum and is female to male, transgender, has really informed my interest. And when the opportunity came up to participate in putting together a support group here in Olympia, I really saw that as a way to become engaged in the community. And so we've been working to get that group established. We meet here in Olympia at the Westminster Presbyterian Church on the third Sunday of each month. And the parents are able to come together and have an opportunity to have some time to socialize, learn from each other, provide support to each other. We currently also offer a group for their transgender or gender nonconforming children, ages 4 through 10, and siblings are also able to participate in that group. And it's really an opportunity for the children to be able to have some time together with each other and establish community for themselves and interact with each other and just have a safe venue for that to happen.
Great. What do you find to be the challenges that parents face when their trans or gender nonconforming children, come out? What seem to be some of the most common issues that come up?
So I think parents and children face multiple challenges. probably one of the most significant ones is the social stigmatization from members of society, and even from within their own families. And as parents, we have a really critical role in supporting our children and just ensuring their overall well-being. And it's a struggle to, I think, juggle that with the societal pressures, especially when you've got well-intentioned family and other friends asking questions and putting pressures on a situation that is already, I think, quite emotional and can cause families to really question how to move forward. And I think, research itself shows that parents themselves are the best kind of influence for their children in terms of protective factors and overall well-being and mental health outcomes for their children. But we don't necessarily have all the supports in place that are needed. So to me, it's critical then that we do have opportunities for parents and families to participate in support groups like the one that we've got recently established here in Olympia.
So what do you find that parents struggle with for themselves the most? And does that change for different age groups or different developmental stages of the children? Are there like different issues for parents of very young children versus maybe parents of adult children who come out later in life?
I think we frequently, across the board, parents, regardless of the age of the child, they struggle with the notion that somehow they've done something, either, for the mom, it might be during pregnancy, or, something happened through divorce, somehow they caused this in their child. If they hadn't done this, maybe it wouldn't have led to that. And it can be a struggle which, again, is exacerbated by acceptance amongst, majority society and again, other family members. And it can be a challenge not to go into a place where you're blaming yourself and you've got this kind of negative feedback loop going on internally. And I think if parents can recognize that it's normal to have those feelings, but then also at the same time realize that research that is coming out really does show that gender identity is wired from birth. It's not something that can be done to somebody. And I think some of the other common things that I see that are challenges for parents of school-age children, whether you're talking younger ages or your older teen years, is navigation of systems. Definitely challenges there. The idea of you've got this bubble of safety, a certain span of control where you feel that you've got a safe environment for your child, and then having that ability to be able to let go and have your children, successfully launch in systems that aren't necessarily well prepared. And unfortunately, even though society is in some ways coming along with laws, parents of transgender children and gender nonconforming children are frequently put in the position of educating these different systems, whether it be your medical systems, your mental health systems, and even your school and college systems. So those are definitely struggles and challenges across the board, regardless of age of the child. And I think for our adult children, again, similar things play out in the work environment, and having, issues there in terms of systems navigation and even, peers and employers not having the safest of environments.
Right. Yeah.
So.
I would imagine that if a parent is struggling with, those feelings of guilt or, like they've done something wrong, that probably makes it more difficult to advocate for their children with those, those outside systems like schools and,
I think,
workplaces and.
Definitely could be, especially if you can't put it in the context of it's normal to have those feelings. If you feel like somehow in having those feelings you're not acknowledging where your child is at. I think if you can accept that there is going to be some sadness and grief and loss that comes with that, because you are in some ways letting go of some of your dreams. But they're moving into a different way of being it. So, yeah.
Okay. What do you think the best thing that parents can do to support their trans and gender nonconforming children is, especially if they themselves are struggling with, some of these feelings? What can they still do to make sure that, that their children get a good start?
Yeah, I think look for resources, definitely. Connect with others, and that's been one of the main focuses of our support group that we're establishing. Is we want to create that sense of community, that safe venue for parents to come together. You have, I think, while every family has a somewhat unique journey, you do have some similarities across families in terms of the struggles that you're coming up against, again, with your school systems and different systems and navigations. Being kind to yourself, recognizing you're going to have bad days, but you're also going to have good days, and just maintaining and holding on to the idea of being as affirming as possible for your child, just loving them. And I think, the thing that comes to mind for me too is just creating that space for the family and the child to grow and become their best authentic self. It can also, I think, help to have family time and establish ground rules. Don't allow any room for disrespect. If you see things going on either within the family or from external community members, put a halt to it immediately. Kind of a zero tolerance policy. And gosh, I don't know. Just that continued expression of love, I don't think that can be overstressed enough. Just love your children. And I think also, if you do have siblings, allow for, I think sometimes we can, I guess, probably refrain from over-parenting. I find myself doing that a little bit with my child. So, yeah.
Well, I would imagine there could be, sibling rivalry issues, jealousy issues. A child who's going through transition or, gender nonconforming can seem to take up a lot of the family's attention and energy, and other siblings, can maybe feel a little shortchanged. I would imagine that could be quite a challenge.
So. I would agree with you. I have heard that, and I've, in some of the research that I've read, I'm fortunate in that my two children they've got a big age gap. So, but yeah, I've definitely heard that amongst families where there are close sibling groups that it does, take up a lot of time in some ways, and I guess the children who identify more in the binary, they themselves can feel left out. They also struggle with feelings of acceptance. They can, experience anger and grief and sadness as well. So, Yeah.
I would imagine that just, for the parents, knowing that there are other parents struggling with the same issues has got to be a really big source of support, knowing that they're not alone, that,
Absolutely.
that this is a problem that doesn't just exist in their family, but in
Yes.
lots of other
Yeah.
families. And I know that your two of your co-facilitators are also adult transgender people.
Yes.
Do you think it's helpful to have, people who have grown up and come out and transitioned and, made, gotten by all right in life?
Yes.
Seeing that, is that a real reassurance, do you think, to
Definitely.
parents?
Yeah, absolutely. The whole premise for us as we were establishing the group, and what I come back to again and again, is that socialization is normalization, and to help alleviate parents' fears, for them to see people in the room who have transitioned, they're successful, they're happy, they have lives that they themselves want for their own children in some ways. Definitely a reassuring factor there.
Yeah.
And, it can't be overstated, I think, to help people in terms of understanding that having a child who identifies as trans or non-binary isn't some type of limiting life sentence. It's just,
Right.
They've got everything available to them that a child who identifies on the binary has as well.
Yeah.
So
what do you think are the best things that we as a community can do to support parents, in loving and accepting their trans and gender nonconforming children, even if the parents themselves are struggling with some of the issues?
So I think that we just need the ongoing unconditional positive regard from the community. We need allies, and I think, reality TV has done a lot to help shine the light on the community, but our everyday families don't come from those kinds of backgrounds. We're normal everyday folk, and it's our normal everyday brothers and sisters in the community who can help best support us and really provide that opportunity for us to have a safe environment and have our children grow up to be healthy, happy, outgoing, productive adults, which every family wants for every child.
Yeah. Well, I know that one of the community groups that co-sponsors this particular support group is PFLAG Olympia.
Yes.
Whose whole mandate is to support GLBTQ people by supporting their families, friends, and allies. So that, that's kind of right in line with their mission.
Yes.
Do you find that there's a really good productive relationship between the two groups?
Yeah, I think
that,
there's, we're definitely very grateful for the support of PFLAG and also for the trans advocacy group and helping us create that space for the families. I think if anybody were to observe parents coming in for the first time, it's, I think, similar to a group that you're a survivor of like an illness or you've gone through a traumatic experience, but you come in and you look around the room and you know that you're amongst people who, without even necessarily having to say anything, understand some of what you're going through.
Yeah.
So there's almost this kind of, you can almost see this relaxation happening in people physically, that I'm amongst friends, I don't need to be on guard, I can be completely vulnerable here and people won't respond negatively. So.
Okay. Anything else you would like to have our audience know about helping parents to support their trans and gender nonconforming children?
I think just, if you hear of families who are struggling, Just encourage them to look for resources in their community. I know that, obviously some communities are going to be safer than others, but there are organizations available to people. And again, it just comes back to helping those families love and support their children. I can't say enough for that. Just create that community for them and allow them that unique individual journey as well.
All right. Juliette Knight, thank you very much for being with us on Tea Time in Olympia.
You're welcome.
And that's it.
Thank you.
We are pleased to announce that Initiative 1515 has failed to gather the signatures needed to appear on the ballot in November. However, the fight is far from over. Certain mainstream political parties aligned with the forces of bigotry have declared their commitment to the erosion of civil rights and liberties for all Americans, and the gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender community continues to be their particular political target. We urge all queer citizens and their allies to remain vigilant during this critical election season. Continue to educate yourselves about the issues facing our community and the threat represented to freedom and equality for all. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today on Tea Time in Olympia. We hope you found our show interesting and informative. As always, remember that the following resources are available if you are in crisis or need support. The Trans Lifeline at 1-877-565-8860 in the US, or 1-877-330-6366 in Canada. The Trevor Project at 1-866-488-7386. And the Thurston County Crisis Clinic at 360-586-2800. Don't hesitate to call if you need help. Remember, you're worth it.